welcome. My name is Abby. I am 23 years old and I work as a DevOps engineer. So today we are going to talk about the wonderful world of personal finance. First off, if you're here, welcome. Glad to have you here. I don't know what kind of wormhole you went down, but as a permanent resident of said wormhole, I appreciate you for being here. Thanks for coming. I hope whatever problem that you're trying to avoid gets resolved, and I hope that at some point you catch up on sleep, because I know you're not getting enough. But until then, let's talk about money. So before I go into my personal financial plan and what works best for me, let's talk about why it might be best to have a finance plan. Even as if you're my age, 23, and don't really have a whole lot of responsibilities or don't really have a whole lot of expenses, why it's still important to kind of think about how you're spending your money and have a goal for what you want in the future. There's a lot of logical reasons, things like planning for retirement, if you want to make a big purchase like buying a house or going to school or buying a car, or even just simply building your wealth. It's really important to know where your money is going. But I think more importantly for me anyways is having peace of mind. So the old saying goes, right? Money can't buy you happiness. You know, if you're depressed and you have $500 in your bank account and you wake up tomorrow with $5 million in your bank account, you're still going to be just as depressed, just with maybe more expensive shoes. Basically what I'm trying to say is money won't solve all your problems, but if you don't have enough, or if you feel insecure or feel like your financial situation is out of control, it's pretty much a guarantee it's going to cause problems. So having a financial plan in place kind of gives you that peace of mind, and it takes those money problems just kind of out of the equation. So what a good financial plan does, it gives you back control over your finances and gives you a plan to make you feel like you have enough to live in the way that you are living, and even a plan to get to a place where you want to go with your money. So everyone has their own style of financial plans that works best for them, but for me, and kind of what I'll be talking about, is a plan that I can put in place and then not have to think about it, and kind of remove money from the equation of what I think about on a day-to-day basis. A lot of stressors in life, a lot of problems. With a good financial plan, at least money might not be one of them. So I guess the next question is, where do I start? How do I build one? That sounds great. Well, lucky for you, I have been a lurker here on YouTube for many years now, and let me tell you, when I say I have put in the hours watching Graham Stephan, Andre Jick, Meet Kevin, and Jeremy from Financial Education, and I have taken their advice, synthesized a financial plan that works for me, and that I have actually implemented in my life. And I would like to share that with you. But seriously though, if you, for some reason, are here and are looking for not financial advice, but education, and you want to learn more about personal finance, go check out their channels. I will try to link them in the description. I don't know why you're here if you haven't seen them, but just in case. Okay, so back to me. My financial plan is extremely simple. Depending upon other people's situations, they might be more complex. You might need something more complex, but for me, simple. Again, I like to put things in place that's like dumb-proof, and then I can just forget about it. So mine comes in 4 parts that we'll talk about. And yeah, take what you want, leave what you don't. I think this might be a good place to start, and then you can add on your own rules where you see fit. So step 1 is the assessment. It's probably the scariest part, and it's probably the hardest part. But before we can even think about where we want to go, we gotta have a good idea of where we're at in terms of money coming in and money coming out. I mean, throwing up just a very basic formula, and I don't want to hear from any mathematicians about how this is wrong. It's probably wrong. I just threw these together. So essentially, it's your net worth now is equal to the summation of your income minus your expenses from 0 over time. Pretty simple. Money in minus money out equals the money that you gain. So for a discrete period of time, say like a month, the money that your increase in value, your net worth, is equal to the money that you make during that month minus your expenses that month. Again, pretty straightforward, seems self-explanatory, but it's key to understand these 3 variables, because once you know what their values are, and then more importantly, know what factors go into to influence these values, you can then control, as best you can, you gain a certain amount of control over your net wealth and your accumulation of wealth, which leads you to peace of mind. So let's start talking about these variables. Your net worth. Your net worth is equal to all of your assets minus all of your liabilities. So in my case, I add up all of my investments, I add up all of the money that's sitting in my bank accounts, I add up any cash that I might have on hand, any crypto, and things like that. But for you, you can include other assets, such as if maybe you own a house, maybe you bought an NFT during the recent craze, if you have a closet full of designer goods, add that up. That is part of your net worth and equal to your value. Really anything that you think has big monetary value, you should include in your initial calculation of net worth when you're doing this assessment. Also, go ahead and try to identify all of your debt and add those up, and then you can subtract. So this is anything from like credit card debt, student loans, any other type of loans. I don't know, maybe you lost a bet to one of your best friends and now you owe him a bunch of money. Go ahead and add that up. You're just trying to get an initial sense of how much you're worth. I understand this is very hard mentally to do. This is, like I said, this assessment stage is the worst part. But I think when you're doing it, you gotta try to take out any qualifiers. Numbers aren't good, numbers aren't bad. There's no shame, there's no judgment. They're just numbers. The most important part is that you try to get the most accurate representation that you can. Because then once you know kind of what I said, once you know where you're at, you can start building a plan to get where you want to be. When you're making a financial plan, you're starting at 0. You're starting fresh. It doesn't matter. There's no such thing as good or bad. There's only, here's where I'm at, here's where I'm going to go, and that's it. So the next step after you calculate your current net worth is to get an idea of what your income and expenses look like. And again, this is going to be kind of tedious, and it might be a little painful, but it's kind of a one-time thing. Maybe you would do this process periodically. I really just did it once. The first time is always the worst, and then every so often, if you want to get a more up-to-date idea of where your money is going, you just amend what you have instead of starting from scratch. So what you need to do is you need to go into your financial institutions. So anywhere you have a credit card, bank accounts, investment accounts, and you need to print out maybe like 2 to 3 months worth of statements. And I like having them hard copy. I guess you could keep it on your computer, but I physically print them out and I sit them down, and then I go through line by line and categorize where my money is going. So when I did this, I did like 3 months, and I took an average over the 3 months for each category to get an idea of roughly monthly expenses that I can expect. So I keep everything organized in a spreadsheet. You can use whatever tool you feel necessary, but in the end, I have 4 columns. One column outlines the categories of income, then the dollar value next to it, and then the next column is the categories of expenses, and then the dollar value next to it. Everyone is going to look different. You kind of just have to pick what categories pop up when you start going through your statements. I will say, do your very best to avoid like a miscellaneous category, because I know for me, it's really easy for me to hide expenses in there of maybe things that I shouldn't hide and they should go in a different category. So in the end, you should have monthly estimates for your total income and your total expenses. So you should have an idea of what percentage of your total expenses go to each category and what percentage of your income comes from income category. In the end, you really just want to know what money is coming in and where it's going. All right, now step 2. For me, that was building up an emergency fund. I knew this is what was going to give me the most peace of mind for my situation. I did this about a year ago, and I was lucky enough to not be in a ton of debt. So based upon what you find from your assessment, maybe your priorities will be different. My emergency fund, I guess, let's put that definition in there. That is money that I have put away that I will not touch no matter what. Unless I am dying, have no job, shit hits the fan, and the apocalypse is here, I have no way to find income, and I'm about to be homeless, then I'll dip into it. You know, saving up for bigger purchases, even if like unexpected expenses come in, that I wouldn't even touch with this emergency fund. Unless I absolutely had to. So the next thing for making an emergency plan is you gotta define at what point do you think is enough. Because I pretty much guarantee that once you start saving money, nothing will ever feel like enough. But this money for me is gonna sit into a savings account. It's not gonna earn very much interest. It's not gonna earn me more money. And I wanna get to a point where my money is earning me money. So it's kind of like at what number do I cut off this emergency fund so that I can start taking on more investments? And I did that by using my assessment, going back and identifying the necessary categories of expenses. So for me, that's like rent and utilities, that's insurance, that's giving myself a food budget, pretty much anything that you need to survive. And then you have your monthly estimates, and then I multiplied that by 6 months to a year. I did a year. I just like to be better safe than sorry, but I think 6 months is just fine according to the finance gurus here on YouTube. But make sure to write down a number before you get started and just to keep that number in mind. Then it was pretty straightforward. I went aggressive on the savings. I cut back any unnecessary expenses that I didn't need. I didn't really put any money into investments until I hit the number that I wrote down on my piece of paper. And I did that because, again, I knew when I started investing I was gonna dabble in some risky investments as well as stable ones. And I wanted to make sure that if I really screwed up and things went bad and everything in my life went to zero, I would still be covered for a year, but I wouldn't be too bad off. So step 3 in my financial plan is managing my debt. Like I mentioned earlier, luckily my debt wasn't that big of a deal and I didn't have that much of it. So depending upon where you're at, maybe this step might be a little bit more complicated. But the only thing that I personally manage is credit card debt. So I do have a credit card and then I use it as a debit card. So I don't build up any debt on it. I pay it off every month in whole, in total. I don't keep any expenses on there that I can't pay off. And I do this for a couple reasons. A lot of people my age either have a lot of credit cards and a lot of money on credit cards, money that they can't necessarily pay off, or they're scared of credit cards and don't have one. I mean, what works best for me is to have one that I keep, one bill every month, pay it off in total. I use it like a debit card. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, security. It's way easier to dispute charges on a credit card than it is a debit card because the money technically hasn't left your bank account yet. And then 2, to build up credit. So if in the future I want to get a loan or I want to buy a house, you'll need a credit score. And you can't really have a credit score without having any credit. So I'm doing this to start building up my credit score. But, you know, if you're in a situation where you have maybe more debt or you have debt in more places, I would recommend, again, laying it out on paper and looking at your interest rates. So if you have something that's debt that has a really high interest rate, I would work on paying that down. There is such thing as good debt. Again, I'm not an expert here, but not all debt is bad debt, but a lot of it is. So that leads us to the fun part, step 4, and that is investing and building your wealth and getting you from where you're at, again, to where you want to be. Before I made any investments, and you know, maybe this isn't the smartest thing, but it's the thing that mentally I had to do before I could put money into something that wasn't a bank account. I have an emergency fund. If all my investments went to zero and everything went to shit, I wouldn't be broke. So that gave me the peace of mind, again, to take on more risk and to start dabbling, I guess, in investments. It seems kind of scary. It seems like something that it's only 40-year-old people with giant incomes can do, but I think anyone can really start investing. And you see that with a lot of apps like Acorns and Robinhood, Webull, Public, all that kind of stuff. But essentially, maybe you're sitting there like, yeah, I hear people talking about investments, but why do people invest? Like, what's the point? Or why would I want to do that versus keeping all of my money in a bank account? I mean, the main reason is with investments, you're essentially putting your money to work. So your money will make you more money. You're buying something now in the hopes of that thing, it's a stock, that thing going up in value in the future, and thus your net worth going up in value in the future. And then when you go into retirement and maybe you start cashing out on your investment, you will have way more money than if you had just taken it and kept it in a bank account and earned just like a teeny tiny interest rate on it. So it's essentially how to get your money to earn you more money. It's great. So currently I own ETF shares, I own cryptocurrency, I own individual stocks, and a little bit in bonds. And there's so much we could talk about in this category of the financial plan step. You know, there's so many different routes that you can go down and strategies that we can talk about. But I think the main thing that you need to do here is have an initial understanding of how much risk you are willing to take on. Because unlike a bank account, this does involve risk of going to zero. But some like general guidelines, some general rule of thumbs. So the higher the risk of your investment, the wider swings you can expect to see in your portfolio. So yeah, a more risky investment has a higher probability of going down 20% or even to zero, right? And losing it. But it typically has a higher potential as well to give you bigger returns. In order of operations, if you're looking at to just like get it started, in my opinion, the order of riskiness goes from cryptos being the most risky, then individual stocks, then ETFs or mutual funds are like relatively on the safer side, and then bonds. Again, there are a lot of exceptions to this rule. There are so many individual stocks that are probably more volatile than crypto. Do your research, try to learn as much as you can, and only put your money where you feel comfortable in putting it. Another rule of thumb is how long are you willing to keep this investment for? So, for instance, I guess we're going over my financial plan. I'll tell you what my risk is. I have a pretty high tolerance for risk because, again, I'm 23. I don't have any kids. I don't have hardly any responsibilities. I just need to be able to pay my rent each month. But if you're maybe closer to retirement and you might need your money sooner, you might want to take on less risk. Just put your money where you most feel comfortable and don't let anyone tell you what's right and what's wrong. Because I also know from doing this that nobody really knows what they're doing. A lot of people like to think that they have found the golden algorithm to make the money. And a lot of people maybe know more than others. But in the end, nobody knows if a stock's going to go up or down the next day. They're all just guessing. So you might as well guess too. So as a final rule of thumb and guideline is you can maybe assume the stock market should return around 7% annually. Maybe every year or so, well, depending upon how involved you want to be, you should take an assessment of all your investments and compare it to that 7%. So if you're doing better than 7%, amazing, great. You're doing above average, essentially. But if for some reason you're getting less than 7% return on your money, you might want to think about just moving stuff around and reallocating because you could be making more. And 7% is kind of a rule of thumb. If you want to get really technical, look up some bigger indexes like the S&P 500 or Dow Jones and see what their return is, and then kind of assess yourself compared to that. So for me, my current allocations are, well, at the time of making this, it's shifted now because, again, high risk, all my accounts vary quite a bit, but I have about 17.6% in crypto, 34.8% in stocks, 42.3% in ETFs, and then I have a little bit in bonds. I have 5.3% in bonds. Again, my portfolio is pretty heavily shifted into more high risk investments. That's because I have my backup plan in place, and then I've gone through all the steps to mitigate my debt and to build up confidence in my investments. Okay, well, that's all I really had to talk to you guys about. I hope this was helpful to someone, to anyone. And again, if you want to learn more, or you want to learn from the people that I learned from, I'll link everything in the description below. So go check them out. Kind of as a channel update, again, I still don't really have a plan of what I want to do and what content I want to make. So I thought I would just start making things in the various niches that I watch, which, thinking about it, it's a wide variety of topics that we might be doing. But I've been really into personal finance lately. I can't get enough of the financial gurus themselves. So I thought that this would be a good place to start. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you're here, I'll talk to you guys later.